Thank you all for joining me tonight as we are going to chat a little bit about the Fae and connecting with fairies. I guess a little bit of a follow on from talking about the dragons last week. I don't. I just got the sense that the fairies didn't want to be left out, so they wanted to have their own little moment in the spotlight to for us to have a little chat about fairies and connecting with fairy energy. Um, so, just really briefly, for those that are joining me and don't know me, my name's Amanda Godfrey. I am the founder of Mystical Dragon, and I've been following the path of a witch or a white witch for over 25 years now, and um, consider myself one of those lucky people that have had a lot of psychic experiences my whole life as well, which I think kind of helped to direct me onto the spiritual path. And so for me, I've actually had a lot of experiences where I have seen and felt not only spirits such as deceased loved ones, but I've also had experiences with elemental energies. So, like dragon energies, I was able to see, very early in my life. And fairies, another energy I was able to see. Hey, Charisse, nice to have you join me. Um, so I've always been an elemental girl. So, some people are very much angel people or animal people. For me, I've always connected with the elemental energies, which fairies definitely fall into that category of elemental energies. And I will just let you know that when we talk about fairies, it's not just your classic Tinkerbell that we're talking about. There are a whole huge realm of fae, or well, energies that are connected to fairies or that fairies fall into. So there are a lot of different kinds of fae, and that they're not all just that classic, really pretty, tiny little Tinkerbell type of fairy energy. There are a lot of different fairy energies and fae energies that are around us in nature constantly. So the fairies or the fae tend to be very connected to the earth, very connected to the plants, to the animals. They really work with. I always see them working with that bringing healing and connecting to new life, and working with the rhythms of nature, being able to even help things to be able to pass, and creating that compost and all of those kinds of things, as well as bringing in that renewal and that lifelike energy, and maintaining spaces, and being part of ley line work, those earth lines that we have, which dragons also connect with, and helping to maintain sacred spaces and all of those kind of energies the Fae is very much connected to. Um, they do have different jobs. So, some of them are very much more focused on, flowers, or grass or trees or certain kinds of plants, or some of them are very focused on the actual earth itself, the real dirt and the minerals and all that lays beneath us. Whereas some of them are really focused on taking care of the animals and the wildlife, and working with those kind of energies as well. I do find that a lot of our fairy energy really does have that real light-hearted energy, a beautiful light vibration. Um, Personally, I really love Brian Froud's work when it comes to the Fae. So if you haven't explored any of Brian Froud's books or cards, I really encourage you, if you're interested in the Fae and fairies, to perhaps explore his work a little bit. It is a little bit harder to get your hands on these days, although we've just recently found we can get his cards again and we have an order in, but his work's amazing. And you can really see how a lot of those fae energies and fairy energies, rather than being, pretty and in the lovely little dresses and things that like Disney would portray, there's a lot of more camouflage that goes on to make them harder for us to see and experience. So, they might look more like the twigs and sticks or the leaves that are around us, just depending on the kind of fae that are there and what they're doing. So, you know, like I say, there's a lot of different ones, and you know, it kind of makes sense that they will camouflage, that they will be similar to their surroundings as well, and depending on what they're working with, you know, that if they're doing a lot of work with trees, well, it kind of makes sense that they would be those colors of the trees and the leaves and you know what's around them as well. So we do need our psychic senses to assist us in being able to connect with these energies. It's not something that you will necessarily see or experience with your physical senses. They come through, or our perception of them comes through our psychic senses. So know that if you have got really strong clairvoyance, then maybe you might be one of the lucky ones like me that does physically see them from time to time. But you'll probably be more likely to see in your inner eyes, or have other experiences of them that aren't necessarily with your physical eyes. Or if you're a real feeler, then you might more so get a sense, you might feel their energy, you might feel that light-heartedness, that real joyful, even cheekiness. They're really quite well known for that cheeky aspect of the fae, you know, where they can kind of borrow things and steal things and move things, and do all those kind of play tricks and do those sorts of things. And I have had many experiences like that with the fae. I can't say that all fairies necessarily, you know, play tricks and do all of that, but I can say definitely there is quite a percentage that likes to kind of borrow things and move things. And have a little bit of a laugh, sometimes at our expense. So they do have that kind of an energy, which is why I tend to caution people a little bit about inviting them into your home. It can be a little bit safer to work with them outside in your actual garden, and in your outdoor space, rather than necessarily invoking them and inviting them into your home like we would for perhaps dragons or angels or other energies, because the fairies do like to have a little bit of fun. And I do find that the more you kind of invite them in or allow them to kind of come in and out of your home, the more you can find, you know, you'll put your keys down, and next time you go to grab the keys, they've moved, they're not where you left them. And you're sure that's where you left them, and you go check all the usual places and they're not there. But you might happen to find them in your slippers or something bizarre like that. Um, so they may not necessarily take them and they're gone for good, but they can kind of turn up in strange places. I've had lots of those experiences and had students with lots of those experiences. I had a girlfriend years ago that we worked out that she had some fae energy that was visiting her in her home, and she would have strange things happen, like snails would suddenly appear in her toilet. Like we would find actual snails that were coming up out of her toilet. And it wasn't until we tuned in and figured out that there was actual this fae energy that was in her home that wasn't being acknowledged. And so that's why they'd started doing things, because she didn't know it was there and they were getting upset that they were being ignored. And so once we tuned in and figured that out and started to do some things to honor them, the little tricks and strange things that were going on in her house started to settle down a little bit. Equally, I've had lots of things get moved around when it comes to fairies. And at Mystical Dragon, we actually have a tree that is just outside of one of the windows, the window of our green room, which we call the fairy tree. And that tree has a lot of fairy energy. And sometimes that fairy energy comes in through the window, and we always know about it. And those that have done some of our Embracing Witchcraft workshops, sometimes we have that real fairy energy in the room and the class can't stop laughing. There'll be jokes told the whole time, and you know it's hard to stay on track because there's such a fairy energy that's come into the room. So they certainly bring a beautiful, light-hearted energy, and yeah, a joyful energy is the kind of energy they tend to bring with them, which is really lovely to work with. But if you're really trying to focus and get work done, it doesn't necessarily help you in getting things done. It's more helpful if you want to, play and even do work like on healing and connecting with earth energy and those kind of energies. Fairy energy is really wonderful to assist us with. So, um, as I said, this is really an energy I'd encourage you more to perhaps connect with outside. So for me, I've got a space set up in my garden where I like to honour the fairies and I like to work with the fairies out there. And even you can do meditation out there, all those sorts of things to really connect with the fairy energies outside. With fairies, we can simply do meditation and speak to them and invite them into the space. But fairies love offerings. They love to have things, not only to have you to be open to their energy and to their connection and to be able to speak to you and connect that way, but they also really love offerings. So we can bring them offerings. Some of the things that they really love is honey is well known, like they really love the sweet foods. So honey is one that's really well known to be connected with fairies, that fairies love. Even just sugar, like you could use, sprinkle some sugar outside. Or coloured sugar is one that I sometimes do with kids, especially, where you can colour your sugar with some food colouring and take that sugar out because they love colourful things as well. Um, Milk is another classic one that is known, very traditionally that fairies love. So you could put a saucer of milk out, but honestly, anything that's sweet. If we have leftover bread like crusts at home, I like to put that out for the fairies as well. I realise that's not sweet, but you could add a little bit of honey or something like that if you wanted to and wanted to add that sweetness to it. With the colour side of things, they love colour. They love crystals. Crystals is wonderful. I like to use that as an offering as well. You could use like your little crystal chips, or you might buy some crystals that you purposely want to put out in the garden. I love to have crystals in the top of pots and around the tops of plants and things like that out there, which I see as being connected, both being really beneficial for the plant as well as being connected with the fairies. And so you can just take them out there with that intent of wanting it to be beneficial to both, and talking to the fairies about this as a way that you're trying to honour them as well. Um, but you can hang ribbons in the trees if you wanted to, like lots of coloured ribbons, because they love that colour. Fairy lights are quite classic because that especially all the coloured ones, that brings in some of that colour and light, and actually is quite reminiscent of how we can often see fairies too. So if you do see fairies, I find that more people will see them like coloured orbs and coloured lights and like sparkling energies of different colour, more so than you'll see an actual kind of, shape with wings and all that kind of classic thing that we know of. So, know that if you see coloured orbs and coloured lights out in your garden or anywhere that you happen to go, particularly that's out in nature, it could very well be fairy energy. And I encourage you to try and tune in to see if that's what it is. So I was just reading Paul was just sharing about I left a crystal in a spot. I was told there were earth elementals in the garden. And he went back to the spot, looked down at his feet, and a little metal tab that holds your bookshelf in place was sitting there, and that had been missing. So, like I say, fairies are good at borrowing things. And so if you were missing something and you were really panicked and wanted it back, the most ideal way is to actually take the fairies an offering and actually say to them, please, could you help me to help bring this back, or could you please bring this back? I've had that work in the past before. I realize you probably didn't actually set that intent when you put the crystal out there, but obviously they saw it as an offering, and so they've done an exchange for you there, Paul, without you having to actually ask. But that's very Fae, absolutely. That's exactly the sort of thing that they love. So if you can set up a space in your own garden, if you want to invite the fairies and that Fae energy in, try and dedicate a space in your own garden to this is the space I'm going to kind of leave offerings, and I'm going to sit and meditate and talk to the fairies, particularly out in this particular area. And you can ask and invite them to assist you with your plants, especially if you feel like you're a black thumb. You can ask them to help you with the gardening and helping to keep your plants alive and helping them to grow well, and to help kind of give you guidance as to, oh, okay, when should I be watering them or pruning them, or all the things that you need to be doing. They can also assist us with animals as well. So if you've got animals, whenever they might be doing a little bit poorly, you could actually ask the fairies um, to help you to tune into that energy, help to bring healing energy for your animals, but also just to tune in, to be guided once again. If they're not feeling, you can see they're not feeling so well, but you're not sure what to do, then try and tune in and say, what is it that I can do that might help my animal, or when they're like overexcited or angry or really having issues, to help try and perhaps calm them down as well. All of that helps. If there's a part of your home or a part of your garden that's not feeling super great, then you could also call in the fairies and ask them to help you work on that space. It might be that there's some negative energy there, or a ley line, one of those earth lines, earth energies, that's not doing so well, and they could come in and assist you in being able to raise the vibration and shift some of that energy as well. So there's lots of things that the fairies can really help us with. But like I said, I really recommend trying to work with them more outside than inside, because they do tend to get up to a lot of mischief when they are inside. And they do borrow shiny things as well. So it tends to be things like keys, your metal tab that you mentioned, Paul, because it's metal, it was probably shiny to at least some degree. They do tend to borrow shiny things. Jewelry, I've had lots of people lose rings and lose different pendants and jewelry, and it's actually been the fairies that have kind of borrowed them. And I can't say every time, but I would say probably 95, 98% of the time, when I've done the offering or suggested to somebody that's got something like that missing, and we've done an offering and we've talked to the fairies and left an offering and asked if they could help either return it or help bring it back, that item has come back. But usually it just appears somewhere strange. It's not necessarily, coming reappearing back where it disappeared from, but it might, like I said, you can suddenly find it in your slipper or on a shelf that you had never, it's never, that thing has never lived there, or those kinds of things. It tends to just resurface back somewhere in your home where you might come across it and be like, oh, that's an odd place for it, but at least it's come back, it's been returned to you, and that's usually the main thing. You do need to have a little bit of patience, because it's not an immediate thing where you put your offering out, you walk inside, and there it is. Although I do know of cases where that has happened quite instantaneous like that. But in a lot of cases, it's taken a little bit of time, maybe a few hours or the next day, that things have reappeared. Oh yes, 5-cent coins would work too, Tamara. That's something that's shiny once again that they like. Beautiful. That would work well as an offering also with the fairies. So they're really wonderful energy to work with. At Mystical Dragon, sometimes I have channeled a fairy that lives in our front garden in the lavender bush that's near our front door, if you know Mystical, or at least out the front of Mystical. And her name's Flower. And she usually brings a light energy with her, and is usually trying to uplift our group and make the group laugh. She refers to everybody as bags of bones. And I've had some people say, oh, she's not really like a fairy, but she's really got that down to earth energy, and she wants everybody to be outside, laying in the grass. She doesn't understand why we're inside. She wants to be out in the sun and doing all those, beautiful, really earthy things outdoors, and doesn't understand why we are inside so much, while we stare at things like screens and, do those kind of human things that we do. The fairies love to be outside, under the sun or under the moonlight, shoes off, really connecting to the earth and feeling that connection to the earth. They'll have you hugging trees and doing all those kinds of things when you're connected with fairies. So A lot like with dragons, there's no actual specific invocation that you need. It is simply having an open heart, having a belief in these energies, and taking the time to slow down. I would go outside into your garden if there's a particular place you want to dedicate to being, this is my space that I'm really going to work with them and I'm going to leave them offerings. Then go and be in that space and have like that intuitive conversation. So it can be out loud or in your own mind, inviting them into that space, welcoming them, asking them to, make themselves a bit known to you. And if you're looking for assistance with your garden or with your animals, etc., then you could, put that out there and ask for that help as well. So there's no specific invocation that you need. There's no, specific ritual that you have to do. It's just that open heart is really one of those big essentials when it comes with working with the elemental realm. It's having that open heart, slowing down, and being open to the connection. Know that it's going to come through those intuitive channels for you. So, trying to be open to those signs and symbols and what you're seeing and feeling and how that's coming through. You might hear them and it might be like there's a conversation going on in your head. Like I say, you might feel the energy, you might feel, almost like a little tickling sensation, or just feel really light and happy and have a smile on your face out in that space, and that's their energy. So know it can be really subtle, especially at first. Um, but the more you connect, the stronger that connection will build. As with any of the elemental energies, the more we connect, the stronger that it becomes, and the more we'll recognize it as well. We recognize the way that they work with us. So that's probably essentially the stuff that I wanted to share with you guys when it comes to fairies. They are real. They are amazing. Um, they can play all kinds of cute little tricks on you, which at the time you might not find it or be thinking is so cute, but afterwards you can look back on and have a laugh at. Try not to get angry, and if you start getting angry and swearing and carrying on, that they've stolen something, well, that doesn't tend to help you get it back. It doesn't tend to help your connection with them. um, so try and kind of center yourself, and perhaps, like I say, go think about an offering or something like that, and go perhaps sit out in the garden and have that open heart space, um, and invite them or ask them to please help return any item that may have gone missing or be moved, etc. I know sometimes it can be hard, especially if you need the keys right now and the keys have gone missing, and you're supposed to be going out the door for something and you're late. That can be hard sometimes not to be a bit angry, but you've got to try not to be in that space because it won't help your items come back. They do tend to decide that they're going to keep them longer. So yeah, so know that fairies are real, and I really invite you to have a connection with them, to try and slow down, get in your garden, perhaps create for yourself a space. The fairy star is this star here. It's the 7-pointed star. So this can be a symbol to work with if you want to connect with the fairies as well. I just pulled this one off the internet and printed it out so you could see. So it's interesting because the fairy star was on the side of the what is it that was in the city? We had the Ferris wheel that was in the city, and it actually had the big 7-pointed star. I don't think they intentionally did it. It was just, I don't know, obviously some design concept that they liked. And then it broke and stopped working. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that'll be the fairies that are having a good play with that, because they've like got this big, it literally calls the fairies to you when you work with the fairy star. And so they will have just created a big portal at that Ferris wheel, which will have invited lots of fairy energy in. And I'm sure they would have had lots of fun in playing with the mechanics of it, and therefore why it stopped working. So for someone like me, straight away I was like, well, that's not something I would have been putting on the side of my mechanical device if I wanted it to keep working for a long period of time and to work consistently, because fairies will certainly like to have a bit of fun with that, they'll think that's a nice joke. So, but that is certainly something you could work with. So you could add it to a space if you're wanting to, this perhaps create a little altar or a little space. You could add it out there as well, as a way to tie in that fairy energy too, if you wanted. And Lucy Cavendish has some really beautiful decks of cards as well. Um, Hers is some of that more classic, really pretty, flowy, lovely fairy kind of energy in a lot of her decks. And she's got a book which she did with Serene Connolly as well on fairy magic, which is really good too. But I love her work. I love Lucy's work, but I also really love Brian Froud, who kind of really goes into some more of the really strange and twisted and those kinds of Fey energy as well, which I very much had connection with myself also. So he kind of, I suppose, goes further into some of the many different kinds of Fey that are out there that we can connect with. So certainly these are options if you want to kind of keep exploring the fairies and exploring that connection and other people's connection with those as well. There is a lot of books and things out there on working with fairies these days too.